Hey everybody, it is 12:53 in the East, which makes it 10:53 on the West Coast. So I want to thank Fast Traffic President and former NFL Senior Vice President of Special Events, Frank Sapovitz, for joining me earlier this evening. A whale of a discussion, fantastic time, and a great interview if I do say so myself. It was a lot of fun, it really was. I am going to allow the viewer count to build up a little bit before I get started with the main event, and that is, what did Mike Mayock say today? Now, for those of you who don't know, right, Mike Mayock is the Raiders' general manager, new general manager who last year this time was preparing to go to the NFL draft in Dallas. That was his last hurrah. And we have now Mayock is the general manager, and we have Jesus Moras who says, Zenny62, I'm ready for the NFL draft. Hey, I'm not quite ready yet. I don't feel ready. I think the reason I don't feel ready is because it feels pro forma right now, yet I have a feeling that when the clock starts, stuff is going to happen. Trades, chaos, deals, okay? And so I don't have a feel for this draft. Usually you can forecast how a draft is going to go, like bing, bing, bing. The 2015 NFL draft was a lot like that. I mean, you knew who was going to go where, right? You knew what was going to happen. 2014 NFL draft in New York, same way. But of all the NFL drafts I have attended or covered, and I've attended 13 of the last 14 NFL drafts, I've covered 16 of the last NFL drafts. I should say I have blogged about 16 of the last 14 NFL drafts. The last 14 straight NFL drafts I've been press credentialed by the National Football League, okay? But of all those drafts, this is the one I don't have a good feel for. And I'll explain why before we get to Mayock. It's because, first of all, how do I say it? The Raiders have 3 picks in the first round, and two of them could be traded to move up at any time. They have a new general manager. The Cardinals have the #1 pick, yet they were a holder of a high pick last year. This is the first draft where you have not one but 2 top quarterbacks black. All right, and it's a great hallmark in social advancement that's not a conversation. I think it should be, just not now, but I think it should be just to see where we're at, just to say, hey, let's gauge all this, because there's a lot of positive change going on that isn't talked about. Like, for example, Dr. Katie Bauman creating the image, or a black hole image, of something that was said to not be imageable, right? And my point that happened this week. But all of that and more makes this draft unpredictable. And you would say, no, why would I say that? Why would I bring in color? And I'll tell you for a second, because there are some NFL general managers and NFL folks who are well-meaning, but still have this idea that a prototypical quarterback is white and not black, as opposed to the standard, which is, hey, you know what? Kyler Murray is a heck of a quarterback. He'll make a heck of a quarterback for the Cardinals, and there's a lot of fit there, okay? So that's another reason. Separate from that, the other reason is Nick Bosa. Nick Bosa was #1, all right? And he was thought to be the heir apparent to that #1 pick. And then, okay, and then we turn around and to see him fall because he didn't play last year. And then he makes it, then it's discovered that he has all these tweets that are exceptionally questionable that he's since broomed. I have personally no issue with him being a Donald Trump supporter. It's a free country. And I don't think anybody of a right mind should singularly call out for someone for being a supporter of Donald Trump. What they should call out is if the person truly is an ist, racist, sexist. You know what I mean? But look, I'm a Democrat, but I'm an old school politician. You have people on both sides. To demonize Nick Bosa for choosing a modern conservative ethic. It's not classically conservative, a modern conservative line. I don't even think he really understands it myself. That's just me. I think is heinous, okay? I'm just saying, all right? That should not be the reason for his fall. But folks, I have a feeling it will be the reason for his fall because there may be people who don't want to deal with that kind of drama. How far? Maybe 2 or 3 picks. Would he fall to the Raiders? It could happen. Will the Raiders take him? You never know, all right? I don't know if the Raiders have a forecast for Nick Bosa falling that far. I would bet they do. Or I'll bet they do, okay? So that's another reason. So, you know, without a little less me, and how about this? A lot less, a lot more. A little less me, how about this? And a lot more Mayock. So here's Mike Mayock. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop periodically at points where I think it's interesting to break in, right? And make a comment or two. But I want to see your comments. What I'm doing is, here he is, okay? So I'm going to move this to one side over here, okay? And I want it over here. So what I want to do is move this that way, okay? And then scrunch it a bit, right? Okay, like that, okay? And then over here, I can see your comments. So how's that? Capiche? Capiche. All right, with that, let's get started, okay?
We're in the middle of a grind. It's kind of cool. You know, the coaches, the scouts, we're all working pretty much 24/7 on this draft. It's a great process. The scouts right now, I'm working with the scouts on the draft, the coaches with Coach Gruden. I'm jumping between rooms. It's really been awesome. Been a great process, especially with what we've got with 8 picks and 4 of the first 35. So, having said that, what do you want to talk about?
Did you learn anything new about yourself as an evaluator, seeing it from this angle for the first time?
I think the important thing is I think you always have to go back to just trusting who you are as an evaluator. We've talked about this a little bit before, and you know, the great thing for me is I've got all these resources now with the scouts and the coaches to bounce a bunch of stuff off that I didn't have as much before. So now I can look at something and say, man, boy, that kid just ran a lot faster at his pro day than I thought he was. We're a lot slower at his pro day in the case of some guys this year. And we've had to go back and really grind it. And but I think the answer to your question is probably what, at the end of the day, despite all the pressure and all the influence, you just kind of have to close the door and get your headspace back and say, what do I believe in, and who do I want to fight for in this draft?
Is there a way to prepare for, as a first-timer on this side of it, is there a way to prepare for the juice and the energy of the moment when the hourglass sand is ticking down and you're in that? Have you talked to people about that environment and how it changes things?
Yeah, I think what we're going to do is try to have our board completely stacked, both by position and by number, by the end of next week. And then the week of the draft, I think we're going to spend an awful lot of time in there, in our war room, our draft room, with the people that are going to be there and kind of going through every scenario we can. I'm going to have people calling in on the phones and trying to get John and I rattled and propose trades. And, you know, let's be honest, I haven't done it before. So, again, if I'm going to evaluate myself, I got to make sure I'm prepared. You know, there's 2 minutes left on the clock and 3 phones are ringing and there's a trade. And, you know, what is the process? How are we going to react as a team? Where's everybody even sitting in the room? What's the feedback? How quickly am I going to get the information on the trades and the point values? And so there's a whole bunch of stuff, and I've kind of got it. I said to John, it's kind of like it's game week, you know, and you know, we want to get in there and practice our game plan, no different than the team would for a Sunday game.
How do you prepare for something that you've never experienced in terms of being in that war room and taking making those calls? Like, who have you leaned on? And what sort of
Well, I think over the last 18 years or whatever, I've got pretty good feedback for what happens, how it happens, the pressures, the time frames. I've talked to a lot of people in this building about how they've done it in the past. Where's everybody sitting? What's up on the boards? I've changed some things already with what's going to be up in the room and some of the information available to us and how it's going to how we're going to process that information. I think the important thing, Michael, is at the end of the day is just some of these practices, putting some pressure on ourselves and hoping, just like a coach would, hoping that if we put enough pressure on ourselves Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday under a bunch of different kind of conversations and trades, and that when Thursday night comes and Friday, Saturday, we're more than prepared to deal with anything.
Trade chart, do you have one? Do you use one of the ones that are out there? Obviously, a few different ones that are out there.
I've had trade charts forever. I mean, that was my job, and teams would share their trade charts with me. And to be honest, I think I saw Coach Belichick quoted the other day about them. They're all within points of being the same thing. So if you're on the clock and you got 2 minutes left and somebody's calling about a trade, unless it's for an existing NFL player, you got to have a way to see what the benchmark is quickly. And I think all teams are using these trade charts that are very, very similar. Now, you got to use your gut a little bit, and there are different times where you might want to get more, and there are other times you might take less. But that's kind of the benchmark to start with.
Yeah. General sense. Yeah.
Hey, I got to stop here. I just want to add something regarding what Mayock just said, and I'll get right back to it. What I'm looking for in a comment is that they do their own mock drafts, and during the mock draft session, you have a trade that'll happen if something occurs, right? And I think that kind of war room strategy gives you some comfort going into the draft. Now, do I know that anyone does that? No, it just seems like a very logical thing to do, given the fact that everyone has mock drafts. We're supposed to have a mock draft next week. I've got to plan that. I hope many of you will attend, be on the phone, right? And we'll have, I'm trying to think of a way of how you engineer a trade proposal, right? But you have to have multiple people on the phone to make that happen. Ideally 32 people representing 32 teams. But my point is, I would think that they would have, by now, have ran through a number of scenarios, all right? Hey, Joseph, how you doing? Now back to Mayock and his comments.
Have sorry, go ahead.
Jerry, I'm having lots of those moments.
How different does your board look compared to one team that would have looked preparing in your old job? Is it pretty similar, your evaluations, or when you're evaluating for a specific team, does it change a lot?
Yeah, it's a lot different. I think my old job was to try to be the GM for all 32 teams, and I had a board that was stacked for what I would call league value. Now, wow, there's a lot of clicks just because I went like that. That was really weird. So league value is one thing, and what I used to do in my old job was I'd talk to a bunch of GMs and head coaches the week before the draft. I'd send them my board because they'd want to see it. To them, it was league value, so it was a tool for the teams to use, and it was a way for me to talk about my board where it might have some weaknesses. So now you're just doing it for one team. Now, I still have to be aware, and we're working really hard on understanding what the team needs are and the scenarios are around the league. And I think league value is a way to kind of understand where you might be able to move up or down in the draft. So understanding league value is still a part of it, but understanding what we want to do as Raiders is the biggest piece.
How difficult is it when you're trying to imagine scenarios that could arise on draft day to know what the needs are of teams picking in front of you, teams that are picking behind you that can move up, just simulating, have an idea of what the motivations are for those other teams surrounding you?
I think it's really important to understand what the other teams are doing and trying to do. We're spending a lot of time putting together some information on all other 31 teams, their decision makers, what the decision makers' footprint looks like historically, what their needs are this year. I think we've worked hard since I've been here at establishing or continuing relationships with the GMs I've had around, just in a different fashion now. Instead of calling up and saying, hey, you know, what do you think about this? It's more like continuing to open up lines of communication for draft night. And I've had a lot of those calls and taken a lot of calls, and it's really been fun.
Yeah, I'm going to stop right there because Joseph Amenderes made a comment I think should be repeated and discussed. And he writes, as I saw the presser earlier, the one thing that keeps sticking, this is what I'm reading, folks. Let me show you this, show and tell, right? It's here, okay. The one thing that keeps sticking in my mind is he talks too much and wonder if he divulges too much information because he wants to sound like the NFL analyst. You know, I think there may be something to that. I mean, look, Mayock's comfortable with the camera. He's been behind the camera for, what, a couple of decades now. Far more so than in the chair of a general manager or assistant GM or anything else. So there definitely is that, but I don't think that's a bad thing because in listening to him, to me, he has mastered the art of saying a lot, but not saying what he should say, what you would want him to say. Like, hey, we're going to pick so-and-so with this, all right? I mean, I think Eric Metz put it very well when he was on my show earlier to this week, and he was saying that before the rookie wage scale, you have people come in, and there was a lot of shifting negotiation, and there was a lot of trying to sign someone right up front and get the deal done and get the deal out of the way. But because of the rookie wage scale, you know what you're going to get. And because of that, there's not that much differentiation, for example, between 1 and 2. It's still the system where, you know, 1 makes more than 2, 2 makes more than 3, and so on. But when you look at the signing bonuses for the first round picks, between picks 1 and 5, it doesn't diminish much, arguably at all. And past pick 5, it does start to do that, okay? And then you get to past picks 14 and so on, and yeah, you get some differentiation. But the rookie wage scale has really made the draft predictable from a financial standpoint and also from a pick standpoint, because it used to be that you would have this excitement over, let's take Mike Vick, okay? There was a thought that Mike Vick would be passed on by the Falcons, picked up maybe by a team like the San Diego Chargers or New York Giants. Mike Vick was ultimately signed. He became the #1 pick, okay? And it was, double check my info on that, so I'm not talking out of school, but my Mike Vick NFL draft, okay? NFL draft. But to make sure that I was, yeah, because he was the first overall pick in the 2001 NFL draft. But I distinctly remember that it was thought that he was going to fall. I mean, he had a tremendous game against Florida State in the College Bowl. I mean, even though they didn't win the game, his personal performance was enough to make him the #1 pick. And they signed him, being Michael Vick, about 2 weeks ahead of the draft, about a week ahead of the draft, okay? So it was known going into the draft, hey, boom, Mike Vick's going to be the first pick, signed, sealed, delivered. You didn't know what was going to happen after that, but you knew where Mike Vick was going, and basically that, we didn't know what he was going to be paid, but the guess was enough to set the table for the rest of the draft. Now, you really don't have that. You have, again, the rookie wage scale doesn't make it so you have to do that. We can wait. You can decide to trade out. You're spending less money. The signing bonus is lower than it would have been without the rookie wage scale. Prior to the rookie wage scale, we're looking at signing bonuses in the area of $60 million. It was crazy, okay? $40, $60 million. And veterans were saying, hey, wait a minute, these guys are coming in here. You're paying them all this money. What's going on with us? The rookie wage scale took that away and just flipped everything to where now First of all, you have to wait 4 years if you're a player like Jameis Winston or Marcus Mariota before you get a payday. And look at what can happen to you over that span of time. You know, Mariota is becoming damaged goods. So will he see any of these market-setting contract offers? I seriously doubt it. All right, let's go back to Mayock. Okay.
Around the league, do you notice any of them ever kind of like slipping up and kind of forgetting your role now and kind of going into that old
No, I think they're all trying to
pattern?
get me to slip up and forget about it. But I've had a lot of texts and phone calls that have been very funny where guys were like, you know, I miss just being able to talk a ball with you. And I'm like, yeah, same thing. You know, who are you going to take? And so it's been fun.
You've been very busy with free agency off season. How well do you feel all of these acquisitions and moves have set you guys up for what you're trying to do in the draft?
Yeah, I think we feel pretty good. You know, we made some major acquisitions early. And since then, I think we've been kind of connecting the dots the best we can with available free agents, not just positions of need, but anywhere, positions of need, depth, whatever. I think we've done a pretty good job of signing younger players for the most part to prove it contracts where it will help both them and us if they play well.
My predecessor here, Reggie McKenzie, his first draft with the Raiders, he didn't have first or second round picks. That's a tough position for a team, obviously. But in a sense, maybe he got a pass for that first draft. You're kind of in the opposite position with 3 first round picks. Do you sense how important this draft might be for your reputation? Do you embrace that, or how do you approach it?
I don't really worry about it, in all honesty. The way I look at this thing from a you know, how do people perceive me perspective is a lot of people doubted that anybody should come out of the media and go be a GM for any team. I know that. I get that. But at the end of the day, here's the deal. If we win, everything will be fine. And if we lose, I'll get fired. And I'm perfectly fine with that.
Having 4 in the top 35 gives you a lot of freedom or ammunition or whatever term that you want to use for it. Coming into a draft with that type of capital early on, how does that does it change or alter your thinking because you have the freedom and the capital to move up or down or do whatever you want? Really?
As John keeps telling me, don't mess it up, dude. You know, I took a lot of slings to get you 3 first round picks. But you know, we laugh about it all the time. But I don't, you know, I don't feel any pressure about it. B, I love it and embrace it because it's going to give us an opportunity to continue to try to turn the corner here and become a good football team. And I think what it really gives us is flexibility, and that's what I love about it. Obviously, you know, we can move up, and you got to know what you're trying to do and how you're trying to do it. You can try to increase your draft capital by moving down, or you stay the same. And the 4 of the first 35 picks gives you an opportunity to consider all those scenarios multiple times. And again, that's why we're opening up the line of communications with all the teams around the league. You know, I think I keep telling our guys, and you guys have heard me say this before, you know, we need to be nimble. And nimble means, depending on what the situation is, to be able to react quickly according to the situation and make the right decision.
How fine is that line between drafting for need and drafting best available? Because with the 4-12 record and as you said, all the holes all over the roster, you got a lot of needs.
You know, I'm the son of a coach, and I know how coaches think, and coaches think need. Okay, and we're a coach-driven building. Our coaches are highly involved, and that's good. I embrace that. The flip side is you can't reach. You got to use some common sense, you know, and that's what I preach upstairs, is that if we're in a situation where we have 2 similarly rated players and one's a higher position of need, great, let's go get them. But if there's a discount, a disparity between the 2, let's not reach for need, because the more you do that, the more you dilute your roster. And that's a conversation we've had a lot.
You find that players that reportedly are moving up and down as you...
Yeah.
Is that media-driven or agent-driven BS, or does that kind of the truth? I mean, is your board pretty static, or do you have guys that have moved up and down a great deal?
I think a lot of it is media-driven, and you're trying to stay true to what your grades were coming through the fall and into February when you stacked the board the first time. But I'm not going to lie to you, there are guys that ran faster, they ran slower. We're finding more about them, medical or character, and it's more tangible things that cause the guy to move up or down. We get the medical rechecks back. I think John and I, is it tonight? What's today? Wednesday or Thursday? Tonight we get the medical rechecks back, and that can cause guys to move up or down a little bit. The character stuff, we get more and more information on character with guys. Those are tangible things that can change a football grade that have nothing to do with football, right? So they're real. It's the other stuff where I think people get carried away when a guy runs really, really fast at the combine. Did you see so-and-so ran 4.38? You just have to be careful. You got to go back to the film.
Sitting there at the board, to what extent do you sort of try to imagine?
Hey, I want to get in on something that Joseph Aranduris wrote as a question, as a comment, excuse me, here. Yeah, here we go. All right. Scroll down. It says, I like that he kind of mentioned that he pushes back Gruden. He looks a little tired. I wonder if Gruden has him running ragged. I think that, again, goes back to something that Eric Metz and I talked about, where he said that, because I asked him, I said, hey, have you yourself wanted to jump into the role Eric Metz is sports agent, still practicing, by the way, but doesn't want to do the rookie thing. But I digress. Metz said, hey, you have to do a lot of work as a general manager. It's not sitting back and, dealing with players. You've got to deal with contracts. You've got to deal with basically every aspect of the football operation that the team president doesn't have to concern himself with or herself with. In this case, it's a him. And what Mark Bedane has to concern himself with is basically making sure the lights in the building are on, okay? That's not Mayock's concern. Mayock's concern, however, is making sure that the money that Bedane brings in translates into an ability to pay players what they're worth over a period of time, okay? That's Mayock's job. And then he's got to make sure he has a roster to replace players when they go down. He has to keep track and replenish that roster with respect to the practice squad, with respect to injured reserve. Then he's got to keep track of players that are on other teams that may come available. Sometimes there's a player that comes available, like Avontes Burfict, that you didn't think you were going to be in a place to get, okay? And so Mayock's got to do that. And then he's got to get ready for the draft. And as Eric said, he said it ages you. And, looking at Mike Mayock compared to, of course he doesn't have the makeup and everything, but look, he looks like he's aged 2 years and 1 already. And that's because of that job. He doesn't know what day it is. He's, the only saving grace about what he's doing is the pay rate, the brand he's representing, the Raiders. Actually, as I said, the only is probably there's one. There's many. The fact that he gets to go not far from home, and he has I would hope, a driver rather than driving himself, so that he doesn't get so tired and fall asleep at the wheel and something happens, right? So it definitely ages you, and there's a lot more to being a general manager than being you're not a glorified draftnik, okay? You got to manage your scouts. You got to make sure your scouts are paid. You have to select scouts. You have to build a staff. You have to change the staff. There's a lot that goes into that. So there are a lot of human moving parts that you have to keep track of as a general manager, and that's what he's learning. And plus, look, he's learning all this on the fly, all right? I'm sure that they're making it easy for him so that they can place him in a position where his strength shines, and his strength is presumably in evaluating players. I say presumably because, hey, look, he's had a lot of whiffs, all right? But there are people around who believe that he's better than, say, Charles Davis or anybody else out there, and he's certainly positioned himself, or Mel Kiper, and he's positioned himself where he has the opportunity to show it. But as he said, and this is what I like, is that Mike said, look, I know that a lot of people who are skeptical that a media guy can do this, but at the end of the day, if they win, great. If they lose, I get fired, that happens. He says, I'm cool with that. I remind people that when Steve Kerr came in from the media, there were a number of people, myself included, who were very, very, very skeptical that he could do a good job. And in my case, upset that Joe Lacob fired Mark Jackson. I felt it was racist. And I didn't see anything other than that, okay? I didn't understand about the office dynamics that were going on. Apparently there were some other things. But, you know, on the other hand, that information came from Lacob, so you have to take it with a jaundiced eye. He's gonna put out information that makes himself look better, especially when you have some authority issue like race that comes up. And but having said all that, what no one was prepared for, I mean no one, not Kerr, not Lacob, not the guys in analytics, no one, was the extent to which their brand new offensive plan and defensive plan and reliance on analytics was going to work, okay? And that's because it was never done before, all right? It was never done before. And so the Warriors came into games with this statistical analytical advantage, and they took the system they ran and made it analytics driven so that it was, for many of their games, unbeatable. Unbeatable. But think about it. All of what I told you, okay, and I told you all that, you immediately forgot that, hey, this guy came from the media, all right? So here comes Mike in from the media, but the question is, in that context, what kind of methodology is he bringing to the table? Are the Raiders going to adjust their system to that methodology? And the answer is no. So let's go back to Mayock in that context, okay? Bear with me, all right? Here we go.
Different ways that the first three picks could go, and do you kind of have a plan
Well,
for the way that
there's a finite amount at 4, right? You know, and that's what we have to be prepared for. You know, regardless of the scenario, we have to be available, ready to pick at 4 and be excited about a player. Right now, we might move up, we might move back. Who knows? We won't know till draft night. But if we're, quote, stuck at 4, we got to be ready to go. And that's a hell of a lot easier than worrying about all the permutations at 24 and 27 and 35.
Since we last talked to you, you signed Isaiah Crowell and Brandon Marshall. Mm-hmm. What do you like about those two guys?
Well, I mean, at running back, you know, we really are happy with Jalen Richard, third down change of pace. He and DeAndre Washington, we think, are as good a pair as any group in the league. But we've got a little bit of a hole at that kind of lead back. And Crowell's 26 years old. He's a power runner. He's a big dude that can move piles. And he also has some breakaway capabilities. So it's a one-year prove-it deal. We're hoping he comes in ready to go, protect our quarterback. You play for John, you know, you got to pass protect. You know, so there's some different things that running backs have to be aware of here. Brandon Marshall, we think, brings a veteran, big, physical presence to our linebacking core. So between him and Vontez, we think we got bigger. We got a little bit more mature. We've got guys that started a lot of games in this league, and hopefully that'll help us bring along some of the younger linebackers.
John's shown a willingness to take on players who have had locker room problems elsewhere, and maybe you too with the Antonio Brown signing a deal. But
yeah, he smiles.
Are there guys in this draft who you red flag to the extent that you simply wouldn't take them, or is that a factor to be weighed in with everything else?
I think there's a balance in every building, and in our building, I think John will roll the dice a little more, and I think I'm a little more conservative. And I think that's a good balance. You know, we bounce that off ourselves all the time. We have some spirited meetings with the coaching staff where they're banging the table for a kid, and I might say he's got way too many red flags. I don't even want to consider him at that spot. And then we get into it. So I think that's healthy, and I think everybody that I've ever talked to that's sat in this chair has talked about the same thing. Healthy discourse between the coaches, the scouts, and trying to come to those kinds of agreements on those kinds of players.
top 30 visits.
Uh-oh, I can see that, you know, here's, I got to say something there, okay? Because I can say, I mean, look, my thought is this, all right? He's looking for choir boys, and these guys are looking for Raiders, all right? I mean, now he would probably disagree with that, but no, I could, because Mike Mayock in and of himself would not take a perfect. He didn't like Cam Newton and said Cam Newton didn't have heart. So there's still that Mayock that's back there, all right? And that's the Mayock that I always felt made him less than a grade A talent evaluator. Where people get, I think, a little confused with respect to Mike is that Mike is confident in his speech, all right? And if a person is confident in their speech, others might mistake that for this guy is right, all right? It reminds me of that commercial where the guy says, well, you didn't do this, you did this. Remember that? It's kind of like that, all right? Mayock has a tendency to do this, and people go, oh, yeah, and particularly in the media. Mike Mayock is a media creation. When I would go to the NFL draft parties, evaluations, okay? Like, and you can look at Zenny62 on YouTube, any of my past NFL draft videos, and we were in the room, I would go talk to Charles Davis because the media would not surround him. The media had formed a line to talk to Mike Mayock. And I felt, because they would ask him a question, and he would be able to rattle off opinions about any player. And yeah, that was impressive. But I admittedly still had the Cam Newton issue in the back of my mind. I'm like, yeah. And then I had the Lindsey Rhodes issue in the back of my mind where he's out, Mike Mayock is out on an NFL Network tour with her, and he sort of talks in a belittling fashion to her on camera. And then last year, he was disrespectful on camera by every time Charles Davis would say something, he wouldn't look at Charles Davis. He would ignore him and look down. And whereas Charles Davis would give him the respect of looking at him and Daniel Jeremiah and saying something. So the body language and that history, it made me to the point where when I came into a room, I thought, you know, I want to talk to someone who knows their stuff. Charles Davis can rattle off player information just like Mayock could, but because he was less emphasized by the NFL Network and black, okay, you didn't have this huge lineup of media people going to talk to him. It was ridiculous. And you know, I would talk about a number of people. So I was doing my effort to really just turn the scales a little bit, okay? Because what you should grade anybody on in this business is, if you're going to talk about draft evaluators, is, you know, first of all, were they honest in saying they made a mistake, all right? Were they respectful of others who are also in the room as evaluators? Were they fun to be around? You know, were they people that you could just sort of talk shop with them and they didn't make you feel like you were someone that shouldn't be there, okay? Because that's the fun part about it, all right? Those are people that you look forward to seeing every single year, right? Because they're just human, all right? I'm extremely happy that Mike Mayock is where he is because I think he deserves the reward that he's for so long obviously wanted, okay? But it doesn't make me say, okay, well, I've forgotten all that other stuff just because he's GM of the Raiders. It's a balance, all right? It's a balance. I believe that in these coaching exchanges, and what Mike Mayock talks about, he's becoming a better evaluator, a better manager, and I think a better person because he's being challenged in a way that he's not getting challenged in the NFL Network media room because his word is the one that comes out there, and they're all by design supposed to get along on camera. They're not. It's not, the production people aren't saying, okay, you know, when I say, you know, we're on, you guys start fighting and throwing eggs at each other. No, not at all. But you and I don't know, maybe you do, I don't, what happens in a coaching room exactly. who said what to whom, who cursed, who walked out, who got mad, whatever, okay? That's a different world. And I think it's good for him to be there, and I'm really happy he's there. I really am. I really am. So let me go back to the Mayock here, all right? And again, I really want Mike to be successful.
Time with some of these prospects.
Yep.
One of those you've evaluated here in Alameda, at Oliver, Josh Allen, some
I
guys.
thought they weren't public. Michael, how you getting all this, man? What's going on?
What do you
answer the question?
What do you? What do you get out of those sorts of interactions with players who are projected to be pretty highly selected?
It doesn't matter who the player is. In our 30 visits, we have potential free agent guys, we have first round guys, we have middle round guys. We have a pretty good blend and balance on purpose. But what we get out of all of them is we get them in early in the morning. To the extent any of them hasn't been tested for anything that we're allowed to test, they didn't go to the combine, measurements, whatever, we get that done. But the biggest piece of it is a huge crunch of time with the coaching staff. 5, 6, 7 straight hours. And we want to find out which guys love it. It's easy to love it sitting in front of John Gruden for 10 minutes at 7 a.m. John's going to fire you up, and then John's going to hand you off to the offensive coordinator and then the position coach, and then you're going to watch film, and then we're going to come back, for 2 hours or 3 hours we're going to watch film. Then we're going to have a quick bite for lunch, and then put you on the whiteboard and find out what you learned or didn't learn. So after 6 or 7 hours of nothing but football, tape, whiteboard, do you still love it as much as you did when John was telling you were going to be an all-pro at 7 a.m.? That's kind of the cool stuff is that you get to see. It's hard to fake it for 7 hours. For 15 minutes at the combine, that's a different conversation. But for 7 hours with these coaches grinding, putting all new terminology and names and things up on the board, asking you to regurgitate it back. Can you retain it after lunchtime? Which terminology you're using, your college or the Raiders? Which guys are in there at the end of 7 hours going, this is awesome, give me more. And there are other guys just like, man, when's my flight leave? So it's kind of cool.
Before you can make some educated guesses about what's going to happen in front of you. That's a lot harder with those two later first-round picks, obviously. Do you spend any time, projecting who might be there, or do you figure, if your board's set, that's all you need to do and you take who's there?
No, I think a big part of it is kind of sitting there and trying to understand, especially at, we have between 24, 27, and 35, we have 3 awesome opportunities. And I happen to think in most drafts, I happen to like 20 through 60. I always have. I think there are a lot of guys that love the game and are safer picks sometimes than top 10 picks. So I look at those picks in there, and you're constantly just kind of playing games with which 23 names are going to be off the board, or we're going to get to 24, and what clump of guys are going to be there, and if that clump's there, which ones would you take? Which ones would you say I think might get to 35 or 27? And it's just, I think the more you do that and challenge yourself and challenge the people you work with to do that, the more familiar. I'm sorry, man. I'm not getting much sleep. The more familiar you will be on draft night. Wow.
Two more guys. The 24, 27, 30, you have the 2 picks that goes together. How much of a factor is the depth of the position when you want? If you a couple positions you're interested in, one that's got a lot of guys available. How are you balancing that with maybe the top player on your board versus?
Yeah, I think you have to know all that. You have to know historically, for instance, how many pick a position, running backs. How many running backs typically go in the first 3 rounds? How deep's that running board draft now? Compared to, so it's going to be 7 or 8 running backs go, or 4 or 5, right? And if you need a running back and you're at 35 and then 106 with no 3rd round pick, who might be there at 35 that won't be there at 106? And are you comfortable with that position versus a guard, a running back, a wide out, a tight end? So all that comes into the conversation at 24, 27, and 35 is the depth of the individual positions.
You guys, a lot has been made of your 4 picks in the top 35, and that's fantastic. No other team has that sort of capital at the top of the draft. you also have 0 picks from 36 to, I think, 105.
Mm-hmm.
Does that sit well with you? Or if you have an opportunity to move back and maybe add a pick in that range, is that something that you guys will actively look to do?
Sure. I mean, like I said earlier, we'd move up, we'd move back. Personally, you heard me just say how much I love 20 to 60. I'd love to get a couple more picks in there. I just think we've got a lot of holes that need to be filled, and I think that's a really good place to go fishing. And if we can, we can. But the other cool thing is if we just do nothing but sit there and go 4, 24, 27, 32, you know, what we keep talking about upstairs is we better get 4 foundation football players. And we define foundation as talent and football character. That's what we want. When guys that love the game, and if we don't move up, down, or anywhere, man, we better get 4 of those guys.
When you look at throughout free agency, you guys have addressed a lot of needs where you could go into the season, if you don't get a linebacker, you'll be fine, or what have you. I say that given the look of your depth chart at edge rusher and defensive end right now, there just aren't a lot of bodies there. Are you at all concerned that other teams read that depth chart just like we do and think, oh, we could jump in front of them to get the edge rusher that we want? Do you think that is an issue for you guys heading into this draft, knowing that edge rusher is such a...
You don't think we look at the media reports from the home media of all 31 teams? Just like they do with you guys, right? I mean, you guys know our roster better than anybody in the country. So people are looking at what we need just like we're looking at what they need. And we're doing the same thing. You know, who might need this position? Who might jump ahead of us? Where do we need to go get that guy? Because Team X needs a whatever position. So that's all part, I think, of the intrigue, the game of poker that this is.
Why go in depth on-site visits with Murray and Haskins if you've got your quarterback?
There you go.
I'm going to tell you the same thing, Jerry, I told you at the Combine, and that I believe in. And I've said before, Derek Carr is a franchise quarterback, and we believe that, okay? Beyond that, just like in any other position, we're going to do our due diligence. And if we found somebody we liked better or thought had bigger upside, then you've got to do the right thing for the organization, okay? But we love Derek. We love what he brings to the table. But like every other position, we're going to do all of our due diligence. And I happen to work with a head coach that absolutely loves that position, and we're always going to know about those guys.
So that's it. So there, you know, I have to say that I'm shocked. I am absolutely completely shocked that
it was a necessary year.
I'm absolutely completely shocked that the questions about Dwight, Haskins being worked out and Kyler Murray weren't asked early and often. Hey, you worked them out. What did you find? Hey, you know, that's actually, you know what, as I think about the press corps, that is less shocking. Okay. Far less. So if you're asking me to glean something from what I heard, I would look for the Raiders to trade down. The Raiders have just 8 picks, okay? So you would like to have 10. And particularly you like to have more lower round people. You get your value picks between 3 and 5 in the NFL draft. Value picks are guys that you believe are just good enough to make your roster, but you're not sure will be stars. So if they become stars, you know, you didn't have to spend a lot of money and to bring them in. Okay, that's the value pick area. That's the sweet spot. And the Raiders don't have quite as many picks as they would like in that area. Now, having said that, I expect the Raiders to go after. I expect the Raiders to keep at least 1 or 2 of the 3 picks they have in the first round and use one of those picks to get a home run hitting running back. My thought now, is that a good thing? Now, what I would do, okay? What I would have done is completely different. I would have drafted Courtland Sutton in the first round, there are people who should have been said he should have been second. I felt they didn't know what they were talking about. And he has emerged, as I said would happen, Courtland Sutton had emerged to become all-pro for all practical purposes his first year, okay? That's no surprise to me. You only need to look at one video to see that Courtland Sutton, with his 6'4" frame, 4.3-yard, 40-yard dash, and his expertise, developed expertise in catching balls in the red zone. That's what really impressed me about about Mr. Sutton with the Broncos, okay? And I would have had him in a heartbeat. I wouldn't have tried to get... I mean, think about it. The Raiders have been fricking around with Martavius Bryant, and now they get, Antonio Bryant, the two Bryants, right? And all that goes with that, when they could have had a solid, out-of-college, bona fide future star on the roster alongside Amari Cooper. If they were trading Amari Cooper because they couldn't afford him because of, financial reasons associated with the Las Vegas Stadium and the downturn in revenues with respect to the tax situation there, fine. You would still have Courtland Sutton. But they didn't leave themselves, the Raiders didn't, with that luxury. I'm a big believer in building through the draft. The Raiders build a lot through free agency. The Raiders have, if you take a look at their roster, have, for all practical purposes, turned over their roster again, all right? And hey, Bob, how you doing? And, my point is that you've got, if I go down the Raiders roster and find out who's gone, you didn't have to go down the roster. Look, Donald Penn, Kaleche, right? You've got Marshawn Lynch, injured reserve. Amari Cooper, gone. Seth Roberts, gone. Jordy Nelson, retired. There's 3 receivers that played major roles with the Raiders last year, all gone. All right? You've got backup quarterbacks, all gone. You have 1 starter that remains. Tight end, gone. You have a brand new offensive team that you got to coach and then hope, okay, that you've got it right, all right? And Joseph says, I haven't heard Mayock or Gruden bring up Chris Warren. Should we read anything to that? I think you don't have to read anything to it. If Chris Warren's going to be the guy, they would say it. Obviously, they don't see him as the guy, and for reasons, for reasons that are not completely clear, he has to prove he's the guy, right? And so it's, you would like for them to say that, but for some particular reason, they're not. I mean, look, there's something going on where the Raiders are not, how do I say it? They're not high. They're not demonstrably high on Chris Warren, as much as you would think that they should be given last preseason. But it may very well be that they believe his, I'm just guessing now, all right? This is a complete guess. This is one of those media things. But it may very well be that the extent of his injuries, which we don't exactly know, are to the point where they are taking a wait-and-see position with him, and they're not willing to say, hey, this is where we're going to go with him. He is, all right, so he's on the roster. That's what you can say, and that's it. They don't, but no, you're right. They haven't, and it could also very well be that Mike Mayock himself is not familiar with Chris Warren. But for whatever reason, John Gruden certainly is, but for whatever reason, the Raiders have chosen not to emphasize him at this point in time. And I have to say that these reasons generally aren't complicated, okay? Sometimes they are, but at this level, I would have to say there's something about the state of his injury. In fact, let me see if I type Raiders, Chris Warren injury, all right, like that, all right, and see what we get, all right. We know he's getting a chance, but and there's the question is, to what extent has he recovered from his knee injury? So you don't want to put, so if the Raiders are not confident that he's fully recovered, but they're giving him a second chance, they're sure as heck not going to put him out there and say, hey, he's the guy. All right, unless they're sure that he can stand up to it. Also, they are banking on Marshawn Lynch's return. So you've got that working. Bob Money says you have to get rid of your AB. I assume you mean Antonio Brown. Well, they just got him. I think that would be a bad thing to do. A bad thing. Joseph says, and of course, if the rumors are true, that he is 270, 280 pounds, it's not going to help his knee out either. No, I don't think he's not going to come into camp like that. Certainly not. But no, I mean, that's the thing. If he's, well, let's check something, because he's not. He was up to 270 as of February 3rd, right? But I'm going to go back and see whether they have him on the roster, if they've put his weight in. And they have him at 246. Okay, so either that's his weight from last year, and they're saying this is where we want you to be. It could be a combination of both. But that also begs the question, if he's allowed himself to balloon to that point, what's going on in his personal life? We're only human. We're just human beings. People have feelings, stuff happens, start binge eating and drinking. Next thing you know, boom, 30 pounds. 30 pounds. But no, you're right. It will not help out his knee at all. That's for certain. Okay. So that is for 1,000,000% certain. Now, something else I forgot to check out, and again, shifting gears, is simply this. But I think what I'm going to do is save that for, I may do a special live stream tomorrow. On where the stadium is at in Las Vegas, okay? Because, and I have, such things as the weather. As I look at it right now, well, I'm going to get something that's in the dark. And there's still that hole that exists. Yeah, there's still that hole. So, and what I mean by that hole is, I meant the one that, the one that as of, the one that has not been completed for the other side. They're still working on the truss spans on the north side. So that's obviously taking up quite a bit of time. But they've got a long way to go, folks. Wow, they've got a long way to go. And I need to check in regarding the labor issue. Oh, you'll be in Vegas this weekend? Sure. Hey, when you go to Vegas, Joseph, you know what, Joseph, send me an email if you're going to be in Vegas. I want to set up something, okay? And then I'll just leave it at that, okay? It is now almost 2 o'clock, folks. I am going to sign off right now. I want to thank everybody for joining me tonight. And like I said, possible live stream tomorrow. I'm definitely going to do a live stream. It won't be this late. It'll be earlier, okay? More mid-evening. Well, in there, and on top of that, it won't be sitting down here. It may be somewhere outside, any place else, all right? More updates. Thanks a lot. Thank you for tuning in twice tonight. And I'll also reveal my guest for next week after I